one of the most important features of QFTest or any GUI test tool is the recognition of the graphical components, because if you want to test your application and drive your application through the GUI, then the most important thing is that the testing tool is able to identify the components always in a stable way, so that you can implement stable tests. And would like to give an overview over the most common strategies and settings to make the component recognition as stable as possible in your project. There are several, let's say, strategies for the component recognition. In most of the cases, the, let's say, standard or default configuration for the component recognition is already sufficient. Let's say 80–85% of the users can use the pre-configured QFTest. Mainly there needs to be some extra work on when you're testing web application, because it's a bit more tricky there if you're testing some Swing or JavaFX applications. Let's say 90%, 95% of them are working out of the box without any tweaks, always depending on how many custom components are you having in your application and stuff like this. And also there's, when we are discussing about component recognition, or let's say the main issue with testing and component recognition is that you get some component not found exceptions, like QFTest telling you that it cannot find the component, but this is 50% of the time this is not connected to that QFTest is not able to find the component itself, because there is no valid component information. There's mainly an issue with the workflow of your tests. And the other 50% are really like component recognition connected issues. But go into detail on this, one recommendation I can also give you about, like, when we see this different strategies or options or configurations in QFTest, I always recommend, it's quite important that you, like, I call it pre-test your application before you go and write a lot of tests for each and every sub-feature of your application. Because if you like have strategy or setting fixed in the beginning and then go and write a lot of tests throughout your whole application, and then later find out there's something not really matching with your configuration or settings, then you need to like adapt those tests, maintain those tests a bit even more. Or let's say the worst case, you even need to re-implement those tests because they are not using the correct object recognition mechanism or whatever. So therefore, I always recommend to do some like demo test cases for all the main features of your application. Record those and see how the components look like. And then if everything is correct, then you can go and implement on a proto scale or something like this. So let me just go to my QFTest. As I said, 50% of the test cases or the problems with components are connected to not to component recognition issues. There are more, let's say, test workflow issues. Imagine you have those small applications. Most of you might know this from some training or even from the tutorial of QFTest that's included in the installation. Also, those car config QFT files here are in the QFTest installation. Imagine you have one test case, and this test case is opening, for example, some kind of dialog. So, for example, this one. And then in this dialog, you would have some clicks on a component, like here, and then you're entering some name and some price. This would be, let's say, your test case. And imagine that this like dialog takes some time in the beginning to open up. You would run into some issues. Let's say this data in this dialog is fetched from some database, which takes some seconds. And it would open the dialog and just directly afterwards replaying the click. Just did the incorrect setting here. Some review feature for later on. So like this, if you have this click, and it would directly replay this click in the beginning just after opening the dialog. there could be also some component not found exception occurring because the dialog is not rendered completely or anything in the dialog is not filled completely with data, like some table which is filled just after opening the dialog and fetching the database. Or imagine you have some search dialog and the search dialog is populating some kind of table, and then you try to replay actions on this table and the table is not filled because the database operation is still running in the background. Therefore, you need to add some, we call it synchronization points if you have tests, to make the tests more stable, because if you get this component not found exception for this accessory name, just because the dialog is not rendered completely, then it's not really a component issue, it's more like a test workflow issue. You need to add some synchronization points for this dialogs. Most of the time, QFTest does this automatically. So if we start recording once again and stop it, so this would be our click in the beforehand. And then we have here this wait for component accessory dialog automatically added. This is one synchronization point. We have this timeout in here with the 15 seconds. And this is just the maximum timeout. So if the dialog is finished rendering or finished appearing after 2 seconds, then you could replay your click here. So let's say you put it somewhere in here, just in front of it. Then this would make sure that the click is just executed after the dialog is appearing correct. In this case, it really goes fast, but imagine one of your applications which takes some more time, then there would be some timeout necessary here. And here I also always recommend to use this timeout field instead of this delay before and after fields, because this delay and before after fields are like a full timeout or just a fixed timeout, so there's no dynamic part in it. If you put in this 10 seconds in here, then QFTest would pause 10 seconds and then afterwards once wait for the component and then go for the click event. But if the dialog is appearing after 1 second, you always lose 9 seconds here because it's always waiting 10 seconds. It's not like some loop where QFTest is checking in between if the dialog is appearing, and if otherwise it goes back and waits some 100 milliseconds and checks again. So therefore, always go for this timeout field in here. This is one way to synchronize. The other one is like here, I have just this dialog. Another one would be if I have, for example, the search I explained beforehand, there would be some, let's say, some status field at the bottom where it says, let's say 20 search results found or something like this. There would be some status text somewhere in your application. You could wait for something like this. And this text is just appearing after the search is finished and after the table is rendered, something like this. Just one sample, you need to find out based on your application what is necessary to check for, to make sure the component you want to interact with later on is correctly rendered. In my case, could be some status field here to make it more flexible, would even add a regular expression because it could be also 30 search results, something like this. And again, here we have this timeout field. If we have a longer taking search, let's say we have here 1 minute in there, but this is again just the maximum timeout instead of those delay before after fields in here. We simply use this maximum timeout, and if the search result is appearing after 5 seconds, it directly goes to the next step and then goes on. So those are mainly the two ways to synchronize your tests to like make your tests a bit more stable in concern to like component recognition issues, because 50% of the time they appear because the component is not visible at this time where you're replaying, for example, the click afterwards. You can also see this in, like, if you have some test failing and in the run log, you also get this screenshots attached where the application, you can see how the application looks like. And most of the time, also in our support requests we get from customers, they ask what is going on here, there's something wrong, we get component and found exceptions. 50% of them are always, I look on a screenshot and see the button or whatever is not there already. So simply there's some synchronization point missing. But this is just the 50%. The other 50% are really connected to the components in QFTest, and how does QFTest interact with those components. There, let's say, is a whole mechanism how QFTest identifies these components. Let me just close this once again. And record another one, but take an empty suite. So let's say we record once again, click in this discount field here and enter 5% and hit the stop button. We get those two events recorded, like the mouse click and the text input. And if you look into those both, we have here this QFTest component ID, which is like simply text to a link to the component information itself, because the component information itself QFTest is storing, it's just located down here in this Windows and Components tree. If you want to go to the specific component, we simply can go here, right click, locate component, or we can simply double click on the connection, which brings us to the Windows and Components tree, select this component. Also, we see here on the left side, if I select the component, we get this dark blue border, which shows us which component is right now the component under focus. And here again, we see this QFTest ID. So this is basically just a link between the action and the component. If we have here some cryptic names or whatever in there, we want to change those. We can even provide our own one. Let's say we name this my discount field and hit the OK button. We get this update references dialog. I simply hit yes. And QFTest is updating then up here the reference to the component. So basically this QFTest component ID is then just updated to the one I changed here. So those both are connected together. And inside here, their component information is stored, which QFTest needs to identify the component. There are several fields in here, which I will explain just after this, which QFTest needs to identify the component. We see here also there's some kind of parent-child connection. We have the window. Inside this window, we have some kind of panel. And inside this, we have some kind of text field. So basically, when QFTest wants to find some component, it basically first fetches all the windows which are available from this application right now, which are like active in this kind of view. And then from this window, in this case, it looks for a panel. And in this panel, it looks for some text field. And this is, let's say, the process of this component identification is rather complicated, because the problem is that QFTest has to be extremely flexible in order to accommodate a wide range of application and to allow a certain amount of change in the GUI, because you don't want to record your test once again just because the application is slightly changing a bit. Therefore, QFTest should take this into account and make it possible to do it by nothing, by not modifying your test at all. This is the idea. And this, let's say, we can simplify this component recognition if you can influence your developers a bit, because there's some of the parameters in here can be set directly by the developers. Let's just see what we stored in here. 1 second. So we have this QFTest ID field here. As I said, this is just a text field, just a connection to the action itself. I can change this however I want it. Then we have a class name in here, which tells us here we are looking at some kind of text field. We have here just text field written in there. But in this Java Swing application, that's no class known as text field, because in Java Swing, in this case, it's implemented as a Java X Swing JText field, like we see down here. But QFTest is using some kind of generic class names. And this is because if we would store this Java X Swing JText field information in here, and later on the developers decide to change this to some other UI framework or whatever, or even subclass some components and write their own custom class, and we put this custom class in here, we always would need to maintain or adapt our test case because the class name is changing. And therefore, QFTest is using some predefined generic class names like text field, combo box, radio button, table, tab pane, whatever. So like all the default generic classes which are available throughout any application. It's the same for JavaFX, it's the same for web applications. So QFTest is using here some kind of abstract classes to make the main or simplify the maintenance in your test cases. So this is getting information out of the application, so which class or component type this is implemented in. Here we have this field called name, where we can see discount value. And this is a field the developers of the application can directly influence, because by default, QFTest is picking this name out of the application. In Swing, this can be by the method .setName and then simply putting in the string of this. And with this, your developers can define some unique names for, let's say, for most of the interesting components of your SOT. So all entry fields, all combo boxes, all menu items, whatever, might be useful if they can set those names to even a unique ID, because then it's easier for QFTest to identify those components. And because other advantage of this is, even if your UI changes completely, if the name stays the same, QFTest is still able to identify the component. So if, for example, if this button down here has the name discount minus 5% or whatever, and this is later on moved just on the left top corner or wherever, QFTest may still be able to identify it just because of those names. And to determine the target component for an event, QFTest is calculating some kind of match probabilities for those components. And the component with the highest probability is used, and let's say the other ones are getting lower probabilities and not taken into account later on. And this is done via some algorithms we refined QFTest throughout the last 10, 15, more or less 20 years right now. And as I said, first the probabilities of the windows are determined, then later on for the lower sections for the panel, and then for the text field. And the mechanism works like this. If I go to this text field here and QFTest looks for this component, so it's basically first looking for a window. Inside this window, it's looking for all panels, and inside those panels, it's fetching all text fields. And out of those, all of those text fields, it's looking if there's one text field with this given name, then it has directly a hit. Otherwise, it needs to calculate all the other probabilities. There are also some other features or attributes here which QFTest can take into account. So for example, here we have this text field, and this text field has some kind of label discount in there. And for a text field, the default mechanism is to use, let's say, nearly connected label to this text field, which is the text discount down here. So this is also stored as an information, because mainly if you have some, let's say, form-based application with a lot of entry fields like this one here, like the label is mainly on the left side or either on top of it. So there's some default mechanisms in QFTest to try to determine these labels connected to some fields, and this is also stored as some information to find the component. We see down here some ignore attributes. This is because those are just stored for, like, let's say, later reference. Right now, QFTest is storing this generic class name in here, so we can see here what this was mainly implemented with. In this case, it was implemented as a JText field. We also have a system class in here, which is in this case the same. If your developers would have some customized class based on the JText field, then the system class would be JText field, and here under QFS class would be their own custom implemented class. And as I said, we don't store this up here anymore because it makes the maintenance more easy if we have just a generic class in here. But if you have some, let's say, some mix-up, or you want to add those as a recognition parameter, you can still say here this should match, this must match. If you have some custom class in here, you can simply say then this must match because you have two, let's say for example, you have two panels and there's no other information to identify those two panels instead of this class name that you can say this class name is important for me. I set it to must match so it gets a higher bonus or higher probability during the calculation. By default, those are just set to ignore. Then we have here this should match for the QFS label. And we see here there's some kind of duplication. This discount is up here, and also the discount we can see in here. This is just because we have some customers which using tests they created with QFTest 2.0 or something like this. And there we had some of those features already in there, but not all of them. So we mainly duplicating it here for backward compatibility. But it doesn't make any difference for you, so you can simply keep it like this. At the bottom of it, we have here the structure and geometry information, but this is just the, I call it the last anchor of object recognition, because if you have up here already some valid information which helps QFTest to identify the component correctly on this probability calculations, QFTest doesn't need to compare all of those because those here not that stable. The structure is, let's say, the position in the class structure here. It means this is the second text field out of 4 in this panel. It's always based on the parent component. So this would be the second out of 4 text fields in the panel. There could also be some invisible here. Also those read-only or text fields in there. So this is the second one. And also we have the geometry in there. So this geometry is based on the parent level. So in this panel, and imagine you have some text field which has no identification attributes, just those geometry in here or just a class structure, then it's not that stable to identify, because even if we modify it like this, then already the geometry changes because it's larger and the x and y parameters change based just on this. So if QFTest just can rely on those, that's not that stable, and you even get some false positives during object recognition. And this mechanism for the probability calculation works mainly top down. So basically, first it's taking into account this, then this, then this. If already some important one is found, QFTest doesn't take the other ones into account, and even then it takes this one, and then as I said, as the last anchor, it takes this into account. Sometimes we have new customers which are not that used to QFTest. They see in here geometry x and y, and they think QFTest is basically identifying the components via x and y parameters, which is not the case. It's just the last option to take for QFTest. But as I said, it's not that stable, and if you need to rely on those, it's more or less a lucky play if you get the correct components. So let me just open the options. In the QFTest options for this, we have for the object recognition several settings in here. We have one under record components. We have here the most important one is this name override mode, which is by default set to hierarchical resolution, which means during object recognition, QFTest takes into account the parent and child structure up here on the left side, and also uses the name attribute to the, let's say, the most probability, which gets the most bonus during calculation. The name is, let's say, the primary field which QFTest takes to find the component. And for, as I said, 85% of the cases, this is already a quite useful setting. If you have an application and you can convince your developers that they set unique names to all the important components like text fields, combo box, whatever, then you could even set those here to override everything, which would mean the name is the primary field. So even the parent child structure in the application is not taken into account that much, which makes it even faster because QFTest is then basically just fetching a component of class type text field, and then it's looking if this one has the name set, which we defined in the component. And if there's one found, it's directly picked. There's no calculation for the parent and child structure. It even speeds up the tests. And it's also quite useful if you have an application with, let's say, unique names, but the application, the structure of the application changes, is still a lot in change. So there are some panels added in between, something like this, then it might be easier to use to override everything. Otherwise, you can simply use the hierarchical resolution. If you have no name set, then you could even set it to a plain attribute, then it would be the same like the label attribute or the other features for the other components, but I wouldn't recommend this most of the times. This is sufficient because then also the parent and child structure is taken into account, because it makes no sense to look for a text field out of a window. And this panel also here has some unique name in there. It's called calculator panel. So basically it's looking for this as calculator panel and then fetching all the child components, looking for all the child components which are a text field, and then you're good to go, and your test doesn't need to take the other parameters into account down here. Sometimes, I know one thing I don't want to forget, because we have here this setting under record and components. We have this combo box here where we can modify this, and we have the same combo box under replay recognition. So the same is here. If you change those, let's say if you change the defaults, then you need to make sure that you also change the setting for the replay recognition. Otherwise, you get into like some quite strange behavior, because imagine you recorded the test case with name overrides everything, and then we replay it with, let's say, the plain attribute setting. Then the calculation of the probabilities are quite different, so you will get some false positives, some other components may match them, so the behavior is not that expected. So therefore, always make sure you have the same settings in both. And also, if you're working in a team, you need to make sure that all of your team members have the same settings. Otherwise, the components may look a bit different, and also the replay is not behaving as expected. To accomplish this, GWT is storing this settings in the GWT settings file. You can look up here. In my case, it's stored under C program data, GWT CFG. And most of the time, I would recommend to simply add this to your version control system as well, and then start GWT with a parameter where you can define where this system configuration is located, to make sure each and every of your team members has the same configuration. So we see here, in this case, for example, we have this window where we have the name set, we have some kind of feature set. And here for a window, we have also, if it's a modal window or no modal window, but an important one I have in here. Imagine this is our car configurator version .1. Could be after the next release, there could be some other versions. Also in your case, could be some tab folders where you have some customer number in there, or some title of the C tab folder is based on the actual date or whatever. So there could be some flexible data in there which make no sense to use during object recognition. In this case here, I have version 1 in there, and imagine I have another version of my application. There would be then another version. So let's release a new version. In my case, it's quite fast. I need no CI pipelines or anything like this. I simply click a button here. The developer stream, the new version is released. So if I were to record a click in this one, then we have again the same discount value field because the component is still the same. But if you look up here, we have here in this JCar configurator, we have here a feature which is called a new version, because this is the title of the new version of my application. And if you look back to the old one, we had there here version 1. So basically this is not that useful, because this could change each and every day. Could be some version number, could be some date, could be some customer number, whatever. So we need to make this a bit more flexible. And to do this, we can simply go to this one here, and select as regular expression, and then we can use a regular expression in here, for example, the easiest one, dot asterisk, which is then matching just the last part of it. So basically this is a fixed text, and then afterwards GWT is allowing each and every character. And with this setting, we can then make this test working for each and every version. And we can still use the same component. Otherwise, we would result in another component recorded for each and every tab, for example. Imagine you have a test with 3 different customers, and each customer is opening a tab folder in the application, which has the customer number or whatever in the title of the tab folder. Then this would be stored in here, which makes no sense because maybe 1 month later you have other customers' numbers, and then you don't want to maintain your tests just by modifying the customer numbers. Therefore, you can make it flexible just by using some kind of regular expressions in here. The same is possible down here in the extra features. Also here we have this regex checkboxes. We can even negate this if you want to allow another value, but instead of this one, which is printed in there. And here we also can say should match, must match. We can ignore it. But it makes no sense to like add some additional line in here and put in some data in here, because GWT is then not comparing this data because it's not able or doesn't know which data to compare with in the application itself. Therefore, we have other mechanisms I will show later on. But by now, this is here for like making this feature flexible. It's also, if you're talking about web applications, let's say we have here this dummy web application. Let me just start this. It's more or less the same then. So let's see, we have here our application. And if I would record something in here, we can again get some components. We have here our Windows and component structure. And up here, we see right now this feature. In this case, I just have in a local file, but if I would record a website, some public website, could be something like this, or let's say this is your test server, test VM1, and then you record this test on this specific virtual machine, and then you want to run this test case on another machine, which is then test VM3 for whatever. This test may fail because the only valid information is the feature. We have no name in here. We have just a window. And if there are a lot of browser windows, it may be hard for GWT to distinguish which window is the important one because the feature is not matching. There would be some test VM3 in here. And if I want to make this flexible for all my test VMs, I can also use a regular expression in here to make this useful. Since we have here some special characters in there, and if you're using a regular expression, you need to mask those specific characters. There's a quick hint in here, simply right-click in, and before escape those text for regular expression use. So those dots are escaped, could be also some other specific characters. And then I have the sregex automatically checked, and then I simply say, for example, this is my flexible part, and the other one should match. So this is then running on test VM1, test VM3, and so on, with this slight and simple change. We also have this printed somewhere in the manual, also in the FAQ, but always it's hard to find this if you don't know what you're looking for in the manual. So therefore, just this quick hint in here. So let me just see one thing that I don't forget. So so let's just switch to the other one once again. But the mechanisms, doesn't matter if I use a web application or JavaFX Swing application, the behavior in GWT is always the same, like how the components are stored, how the parameters are set in this Windows and components tree. The mechanisms are basically the same. Just the engine below is a bit different, but the mechanisms are completely the same. So let's say we have this test case here, which is doing some kind of accessory changes, like it's clicking in here, creating some new accessories, changing those and deleting those. Let's just simply run this. Hopefully it still runs. Let's see. So this would be my test case. And this test case I created, it's running each and every night, running successful, quite fine for me as a tester. And then my developers come and release a new version of the application. So the new version is released. And then again, my tests are running each and every night. And then we see already there's some kind of issue. We get one exception. And then we jump to the error. And then the tester's nightmare, we get this component not found exception. We see the accessory price couldn't be determined. And if we look in here, this one, we see here we have some kind of price field, so we need to find out what was going wrong here. The easiest way, what I recommend most of the time here, is basically to go to the step which is failing. So basically we can go to our run log, go to the component, do a right click and say find node and test suite. So we can directly go to the step. Let me just close the run log. A bit more space. So we see there is some replay in accessory name. We also see the highlight of this. This was working. Also accessory ID was working. And the problematic one was this accessory price. We see also here there is no highlighting. So GWT is not able to identify the component. So what I normally do is just double click on it to jump to the component and then mark this component so we can find it later on. Here it's a quite simple tree, but it could be also hundreds of branch layers below. And what I do then is simply record a click to the price field once again to, let's say, re-record the component or find out which component my recording is creating afterwards. If this would be some kind of button like this cancel and OK button here, I would recommend to record a right click or record a check, because otherwise the dialog is closed if I record a click on OK. And if this dialog is causing some pre-test running for 30 minutes and I just want to analyze it, it's kind of a time waste if I simply close the dialog just to find out which component is there. So I simply use the check mode, because then I can simply click here and record the component, and then I can see which component is in there. In my case, I just have this price field. So I simply click in there. And then we see a mouse click got recorded for accessory price field. Again, we go to the component and we see already it's a different one. This is the other one. In this case, even don't need to mark it because it's just next to it. Otherwise, if you have a larger tree, you can use these marks, because then you can simply go through the shortcuts, Control E and Control Shift E, to jump back and forth the components to compare the differences between those both. In my case, since they're just next to each other, I can simply click back and forth to those. And as you can see here, this is the old one. The name, the internal name the developers defined was accessory price. And the new one has accessory price field set. So in this case, the developers decided by any reason to change the internal name. Could be some really necessary change because some internal logic depends on it, whatever. And now as a test developer, I need to decide what is right for me. So I need to decide if it's like a really necessary change to the component. So I adapt my test to the new component, or if I want to just inform the developers there's something wrong. It's always based on the component or whichever feature you need to decide what is the right choice here. In my case, I say, okay, this is the component has changed. I want to use the new one. So simply to make my tests running I had beforehand, like this one here, I could like modify my test case, all my procedures. Instead of this accessory price here, I could put in accessory price field. I could also do something like this, like just rename the old one and then just rename this to accessory price, because then I use the new component information, but I don't need to modify each and every test case. I'll simply rename those down here. And as I said, this is just some user chosen name. I can simply change this. So now the new component information would be used. I can go up here in my test case and see right now everything is working again. So I could use it like this. I could remove the old one, which is not necessary anymore, but it could also be the case that I have a lot of development branches also for my test, and I want to support accessory price, and I also want to support accessory price field in my test cases. Because I don't want to maintain or change or modify all my branches, I simply want to support both of them. This is also possible in QFTest. Let me just switch back beforehand. So this was my recording beforehand. What I could do in this case, I can tell QFTest how to identify this component or how this field is filled with the text or the information necessary in there. And all of those fields, like the class name, the feature, the name, the extra features, I can provide my own custom mechanism to tell QFTest how QFTest should determine this attribute. For example, we have seen some components with no information at all, like here in the web. We have here some components filled, but here there's some without a name, without a feature. So I could write my own mechanism to tell QFTest how to find out a name or how to find out a feature. This is done in QFTest via resolvers. Resolvers is like a scripting API in QFTest, which you can implement a resolver for each and every of those fields. So here, if I want to modify this or provide my own custom algorithm, I would need to implement a class name resolver. Here would be a name resolver, a feature resolver, and so on. There's a whole chapter on this in the manual. I think there's also a special webinar chapter about it, or another special webinar about this. Just here to give you a small idea on this, how this works. I have a resolver already predefined here, even to save some time. And what we need to do there is tell QFTest that I want to use our own mechanism. So I basically tell this resolvers interface I want to add my own resolver. In this case, some accessory price field resolver. It's just my predefined name. I need later on to delete it again. Here I define which procedure or method I'm implementing, and here I can define for which components this should be registered. Could be a text field, could be for all components, could be for combo boxes and text fields, whatever, it's up to you. In this case, I want to limit it to all the text fields. Could also be just one single component, doesn't matter, it's just up to you. And here in this procedure itself, I can define my mechanism. In this case, it's quite easy. I basically fetch the default name QFTest is normally using. And if this one is accessory price field, then I say if there's a name accessory price field coming in, then I'm simply returning accessory price. And with this, I can make the new version of the application also running with the old component information. We can also use it the other way around. If there's accessory price coming in, I want to return the new name to support the old and the new ones. And if I record this, replay this once, so the script is registered, this resolver is registered internally in QFTest. And if I record this price field once again, remember it was accessory price field beforehand, and now it's accessory price. So with this, I can make the old and the new version running back and forth with the same, just with this slight change. And these resolvers are used for making this double use possible, but the main reason to use this resolvers is to provide some additional information. let's say we have some components with no real information, like here, this div component or whatever. There's no name, no feature, nothing at all. And you want to provide some additional information, and you know there's some parent component on top of it with some valid information in there, then simply implement your mechanism and tell QFTest, go 2 levels up, use the parent component, and then fetch out of the parent component some value, and then we use this value as a name, for example, or feature. It's up to you then. With this, we can implement a bunch of resolvers to modify the, let's say, the default mechanism here. And since this is a bit complicated for web components, because you see here, we have this table. Inside this table, we have some table cells, table rows. Start this once again. And record some click on the table itself, like the data table. You will see a bit more difference. So if I record here, this one, record here something, this car, and then, for example, click on this -5% button down here, go into QFTest. Then we see down here, we have a TD field, and also we have this calculator panel.div, which is simply the name of the -5% button. But out of this here, I cannot see that this is a button, and I also cannot see which column or which cell in the table I selected here, because there's no information of the component. Also here, there's just a div, and imagine you have a web application, there could be hundreds of divs, and this one is just relying on the structure and just relying on the geometry. Just a simple change of the size of the web application could change your behavior of your object recognition. And that you don't need to like implement each and every resolver for those components here. There's some predefined, or let's say some helper procedure in QFTest. It's called a custom web resolver, which some of you may know already. It's just basically just a procedure out of our QFS.QFT standard library. And inside here, you don't need to implement your own resolvers. You can simply call this procedure, and just by mapping via parameters, mapping components via parameters, you can define the behavior inside those fields. So for example, here I have a button equals button, or down here I have a data table equals table. This in front here are the CSS classes in your application. If we look to our recording once again, then we see down here, this has a class data cell. This is the table row. Here's the table, which has a class data table. And also here, this div has a class button, which is then used by the developers to load a style sheet to render this as a button or whatever. And if I put this in here and tell QFTest if the class is a button, then I want to use this as a generic button inside QFTest. The same definitions here for the table, also for the table header. So basically you need to do this mapping once again in the beginning for all of your custom components, let's say. And if I run this custom web resolver once and start the recording once again, so let's say we select the mini golf and we click -5% once again. You see a slight difference. This was the recording beforehand, which had just vehicle table.td with no output or no information which cell this was. Here we have a click at vehicle table, add column model, add the third element. We could even put in here, one sec. Something like this. Even for a textual search, we could put in this, which is then working and selecting the car. And also here, for the mouse click on the button, we directly see it's button -5. And if we go to the component, we see down here, we have now class name button, we have the feature filled in there. Beforehand, it looked like this, no information in there, just a button in there. So just by calling this procedure with the parameters, we get a way more stable object recognition. Right now, the textual information are used. Also, the table is identified as a real table. I can use this sub-item index, all the stuff, which is way more useful than relying on this TD elements here with basically no information, just TD and then class index and X and Y parameters. So therefore, we can use this custom web resolver, and you can even combine this with the default, or let's say the classic resolvers, the other ones we have seen before, and if there you need to do some additional modifications. For this custom web resolver, we also have some special webinar. Also, there's a whole chapter on it describing step by step how to do this mapping in here. And since this is a bit tricky and you run into any issues, just contact our support and they will be glad to help you with this. So since I see we are running more or less out of time, I still have two little chapters on here. We'll just see how we can speed this up. Okay. So once again to the other application. So let's say we have here our vehicles dialog, and in this dialog we have a new button, we have a change button, a delete button, a cancel, and an OK button. And if you look in my test case in here, I have the wrong dialog, I have the accessories dialog, but it's no difference. I have here a procedure called click new, I have a procedure called click OK. And if you look into this one, we see there is a new button. On a click OK, we have a click delete. So we have for each and every component in this accessory dialog, we have a button recorded down here with the component information in there. It's not that big issue because all of them have valid component recognition information, so they are identified quite stable. But the problem is, if you look in the other dialog, we have here the vehicles dialog. We have here also this change button panel. So basically this is the same like this. And also in here we have a new button, we have a change button, a delete button. So basically this is the duplication of the same buttons, which make no sense because if those are changing later on, if the name is changing or the label is changing, I need to, and since those are rendered on the same mechanism in the application, they're just defined once in the source code somewhere, I need to adapt both of these Windows and components branches with the changes, which is then a maintenance hassle. So therefore, what I would recommend is to simply copy and paste one of those. I just used Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V, and created a new component. And this one, I simply name generic button, then I simply remove the name. Not that necessary for me. And here in the feature, I don't want to use some predefined text. I simply use a variable called text. This one is just the application and simply skip it. So what I could do now is put in here another procedure. We name this click button. And this procedure gets one parameter. And in this, we use the component generic button. Right now, let me just move this to a mouse move event. Otherwise, I cannot easily show this, how it behaves. Otherwise, the dialog is still clicked away. And then if I want to use this in my test case, I can simply define the parameter which I want to click. So let's say delete. And if I replay this, it goes to the delete. Can do the same for OK button. And it goes to OK. So basically, I just use a parameter to define which button I want to click. The advantage of this is that you just have one procedure where you can maintain this. The other advantage is this is even working if there's some new button introduced. You don't need to record the new button at all. You simply pass in the new parameter of the button in here, and you're good to go also for new buttons. This is quite useful, and you have some kind of toolbars, like here some button bars in here. Same would be useful for menu items, also for text field, whatever which you interest this way, which is quite useful using this generic components. There's also a chapter in the manual on this. We just go once to my button in here. Right now, this button is in this change button panel, which is in this accessories dialog. So right now, this would mean it's just working in the accessory dialog. If I would make this dialog on top here also generic, so basically skip this out and also skip this out, then the same procedure should also work on the vehicles dialog without any change. So basically I have a generic dialog, and in this I have a generic button, and I have one click OK procedure which is working on each and every dialog, and I don't need to record each and every of those. This is, let's say, called generic components, which is, as I said, useful for toolbars, menus, tab folders, whatever, something which you can simply identify by one parameter. We are already running out of time, but this was more or less all the information I could put in this short amount of time. So thank you for your attendance. I will stop the recording. If there are some questions afterwards, I'm still in the session for, let's say, 10-15 minutes. You can drop it in the chat here. And also we'll upload this video later on to our website where you can watch it back and forth to see the discussions once again. Okay, then goodbye and thank you for your attendance.